a Nazariya critical dialogue series organized under the Geopolitics and Strategies Constellation at Ideas OP Jindal, a global university. Today's discussion is centered on a topic of immense strategic significance, that is space as the next battleground. To briefly introduce myself, I am a doctoral research fellow at the Jindal School of International Affairs, OP Jindal Global University. Before embarking on my academic journey here, I was associated with Max Security Solutions, where I worked as a coordinator at the GSOC. I also have around 3 years of experience in the renewable energy sector, which has provided me with a diverse perspective on the global security issues. My academic background includes an engineering degree with a major in electronics and communications, as well as a master's degree in political science and international affairs. My research interests primarily revolve around critical and disruptive defense technologies, counterterrorism, open source intelligence, and geopolitical dynamics in the West Asia. Firstly, let me introduce you to IDEAS, the newly established Office of Interdisciplinary Studies at OP Jindal University. IDEAS serves as a university-wide incubator for interdisciplinary research, providing a dynamic space for cross-disciplinary learning and exploration. Our mission is to facilitate collaborations across JGU and with external stakeholders, including practitioners, policymakers, think tanks, and civil society. Via this collaborative approach, we aim to create a novel research ecosystem that fosters innovative thinking and a multidisciplinary outlook. Ideas, via its geopolitics and strategic constellation, has aimed to find practical perspectives to solve the problems in international relations by utilizing economics, geography, history, technology, and other disciplines. Ideas aims to foster the scope of practical discussions among various groups and experts. Within Ideas, the geopolitics and strategies constellation stands as a hub for interdisciplinary research focusing on the multifaceted aspects of global politics. Our constellation is dedicated to investigating various dimensions of geopolitics, including conflict studies, mitigation and mobility, international relations, security studies, and trade and foreign policy. By exploring these areas, we aim to unravel the complexities of contemporary geopolitical dynamics and the implications for both regional and international affairs. Via rigorous research and collaborative efforts, we strive to provide actionable insights and strategies that address the pressing challenges in global politics, fostering a deeper understanding and more effective policy making in the international arena. As we witness the rapid advancement in space technology, the geopolitical landscape is shifting in unprecedented ways. Space, once viewed as the final frontier for exploration and scientific discovery, is now becoming an increasingly contested domain with profound implications for global security. The emergence of space uh, as a potential battleground is reshaping traditional power structures, redefining strategic priorities, and challenging existing norms of international governance. In the 21st century, space has evolved beyond its original purpose as a realm for exploration and peaceful collaboration. It has become an extension of the geopolitical competition we see on Earth, where the militarization of space is no longer a theoretical possibility, but a reality. Nations are now investing heavily in space capabilities, not just for scientific advancements, but for military dominance too. The development of anti satellite weapons, that is, ASAT, space based surveillance and reconnaissance systems, and other counter space capabilities underscores the growing importance of space in the national security strategies. The complexities of space security are further compounded by the involvement of actors and private enterprises, which adds new dimensions to the traditional states a centric view of geopolitics. The role of commercial entities in space, from launching satellites to providing critical infrastructure for communication and navigation, has made space both an economic and strategic asset. However, this also introduces vulnerabilities as commercial satellites could become targets in potential conflicts, and the actions of private companies could influence national policies and international relations. Moreover, the evolving nature of warfare is increasingly incorporating space as an important element. The integration of space based technologies with conventional military operations has revolutionized how wars are fought, enabling precision strikes, real time intelligence, and enhanced communication. However, this also raises concerns about the weaponization of space, the risk of space debris from destructive testing, and the potential for an arms race in space. These dynamics make the topic of today's discussion incredibly timely and crucial. Understanding the strategic implications of space as a battleground is essential for reshaping policies that can address these emerging challenges while promoting peace and stability in the global order. We are extremely honored to have with us today Group Captain Dr. Ajay Lele, retired, the Deputy Director General of the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, that is MPIDSA. Earlier, he was a senior fellow at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis and headed its Center on Strategic uh, Technologies. He started his professional career as an officer in the Indian Air Force in 1987 and took early retirement from the service to pursue his academic interests. He has a master's degree in physics from Pune University and a master's and MPhil degree in defense and strategic studies from Madras University. He has done his doctorate from the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. His specific areas of research include issues related to the weapons of mass destruction, space security, and strategic technologies. He has contributed articles to various national and international journals, websites, and newspapers. He has authored 10 books and has also been an editor for 7 books. He is a recipient of the K. Subramaniam Award in 2013, which is conferred for outstanding contributions in the area of strategic and security studies. Today's discussion promises to be an enlightening exploration of how space is becoming an arena for both cooperation and conflict, and what this means for a global security. Dr. Lele will provide us with his invaluable insights into these emerging challenges and opportunities. Before we begin, I would like to express my thanks to Ideas for organizing this important dialogue series and to all of you for taking the time to join us today. Without further ado, let me hand over the floor to Dr. Lele. Thanks a lot. Dr. Lele, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Mohit, for a nice and elaborate introduction. Let me also thank Ideas, OP Jindal University, and particularly Dr. Gunjan Singh for pushing me to talk to you people on this interesting subject. In fact, much has been said about space for a couple of years now, but this is not the past. A couple of years back, one of the US scholars, she was telling me that she was giving a presentation about space issues to the US Congressional Committee, and they were arguing essentially for introduction of an additional weather satellite. So one of the Congress members quite noviously had asked us her that we come to know about the information of a weather on television. Why do you require a satellite for that? So this is the way the understanding of a space, even in developed countries, was there, say, a few decades back. But now much ground has been covered, and there are many people who have developed certain amount of understanding, if not as an expert, but at least as an onlooker on what is happening into the domain of a space. Particularly in Indian context, because of our success with India's Chandrayaan mission and all that, much of things have been said. But my subject is slightly different than what actually everybody speaks about the space. I'm going to speak space not as a domain which is essentially used for the betterment of mankind, but also one of the tenets of this domain as can space turn into a next battleground. So I thought that before getting into the details of the battleground aspects, already Mr. Mohit has spoken about ASAT technologies and all that. Let me first try to develop some sort of a context of today's discussion. So when you look at a space technology, it is not a technology. Actually, it is a multidisciplinary science. I'm sure some of you at least must have heard about people are going towards asteroids and even mining them and all that. So there are a lot amount of areas as far as this particular technology is concerned are part and parcel of it. So when one is talking of a space technology, it is not a typical technology, but a very holistic view one has to take about it based on their understanding of various technologies and how these technologies could be helped to make your assets workable out into the space. As for the reports which are just a few months back, there could be around, say, 1000 plus active satellites. Interestingly, out of these active satellites, 6,000 plus satellites belong to only one constellation, that is a Starlink constellation of SpaceX. So you can understand that space has become a very important area, particularly both from an internet and a commercial point of view, only in recent times. The majority of these satellites are obviously into a low Earth orbit. Normally, your orbit, what we call between the altitude above the Earth's surface from 400 kilometers to 1,200 kilometers. The other orbits, I'm sure you must be knowing it, but just for the sake of understanding, the geostationary orbit is an orbit where the satellites are positioned at an altitude of 36,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface. So you can understand that there is a significant amount of difference as far as altitudes are concerned from the low Earth orbit to the higher orbits, which where particularly in a geostationary orbit, we put our communication satellites. So you can make out from these figures also that how many satellites are there in low Earth orbit. And presently, essentially for the communication requirements and more importantly for the requirements of internet, how these satellites have been positioned and how much role a private industry is playing into actually putting more satellites out into the space. If you really look at it, space is obviously known as a rocket science, a very difficult science to master on. So there are very few countries in the world who were able to master on this technology. You can see it over here, almost 9 to 10 countries only have got a capacity to launch their own satellites. We call these countries as a spacefaring nations. Essentially, a country becomes a spacefaring nation if a country can launch a satellites by using own satellite launching systems or the rocket systems. So the moment you develop certain amount of expertise into launching rockets into the space, and you know how to develop a satellites and how to monitor those satellites by using your ground infrastructure, you come into the category of a spacefaring state. And today we got very few countries which are there who are becoming a spacefaring state. Here, I would like to make one mention that as far as Europe is concerned, Europe had decided that they will not go solo country by country. So there is a collaborative effort which has happened, that is a European Space Agency. Hence, as far as Europe is concerned, there is only one country, one can say, which is putting satellites out into the space. But even if you really look at it at the rest of the world, amongst the group of developing countries, one can say that India was the first one to enter in this domain by 1980. Subsequently, Israel was there. Now both the Koreas are a part of it. Even Iran also has got certain amount of capacities. But what has changed over a period of time is the role of a private players. Even India's private players have now started undertaking launches, not into the space, but in a suborbital thing, and they are also aiming to go to the space. So the development of a and an involvement of a private player has actually made a significant amount of a difference. At the same time, one must understand that when we go to the space, the satellites belong to whom? Obviously, the launching country. If any problem comes up with this satellite, who is responsible for it? Definitely the launching country. But when really one looks at these issues at the backdrop of, one can say, can space be a common heritage to mankind? There have been debates and discourses on these issues. But broadly understanding, definitely you just can't go and claim anything and everything on the surface of the earth also, because you got a Antarctica convention and various other conventions which are there. which are actually saying that your high seas, then Antarctica, all these issues, all these aspects belong to a conceptualization called common heritage to mankind, or what we call global commons. And space also actually belongs to it. So I just can't go and start selling the land on the moon. I'm sure some of you must have read stories about it, but it is actually a common heritage to mankind. Now, how it will evolve over a period of time and many countries will start going to the moon, will there be some sort of a fights amongst the nation states and all that? That's a matter which will evolve over a period of time. But one should be aware at this point in time, only when people are talking of a space warfare, it is not only a warfare only into a low Earth orbit or a geostationary orbit. Now people have started putting claims onto the lands over the moon and Mars also. So that concept of a common heritage to mankind or a global commons always should be kept behind your thinking, because that only will eventually stop people making unnecessary claims onto the lands of the moon and Mars and subsequently getting into any sort of a conflicting situation. This idea is not part of a space warfare, what we are going to discuss today. But I thought at the beginning only it's essential to just give you an idea that yes, this is where the nature of a warfare could evolve, say after 1 decade or 2 decades also. But before getting into the nature of a warfare, what are the issues about space weaponization? I thought that let me first establish a politico-strategic backdrop as far as developments in a space regime are concerned. If you go back to the development of a satellite technology, it has been out and out a technology which has been used for the military purposes. So when today we are talking of a space weaponization and a warfare in space, essentially one must understand and appreciate that it all started because of a military reasons only. Imagine I'm talking of the year 1957. That was a thick period of the Cold War. The entire geopolitics of those period was discussed based on the nuclear capabilities of two major power blocks, one led by US and other led by the Soviets. So when the first satellite was launched into the space, actually hell broke loose as far as United States is concerned, because they realized that the Soviets have now developed a capacity to do certain amount of a recurrency or some sort of a spy activities by sitting into the space also, because you have got a satellite, it is obviously known as eyes in the space, so you have developed certain amount of a capacity as far as the intelligence gathering mechanisms are concerned. So definitely as far as the Soviets were concerned, their capabilities into the domain of a nuclear aspects has become very stronger, because now they have got an additional mechanism as far as collecting the information is concerned. Obviously, US was not going to take it easily, and within less than 1 year, they also launched their own satellite. So somewhere there was a parity as far as the space technologies was concerned in the two power blocks. But actually, one can say that hell broke loose as far as the understanding of the US from a technological perspective was there when you had the famous Gagarin movement in the year 1961, when the Soviet astronaut Yuri Gagarin went to the space, stayed there for some hours and got back. That was actually a defining moment as far as domain of a space was concerned. Because the Cold War era was not only about, one can say, nuclear one-upmanship. It was about geopolitics. It was about telling the world or telling each other what are your technological capacities. So when a bloc like Soviets were able to send a individual to the space and get him back successfully on the surface of the Earth, it was an eye opener as far as US was concerned, because they understood that the entire world has realized that as far as the race of a technology or a technological one-upmanship is concerned, it's Soviets who have defeated them hands-on. So there was a understanding at the US political circles, including NASA, that they have to do something so big, so humongous, that the world will forget about this Gagarin movement and US supremacy into the domain of a technology will be re-established. And trust you me, that's the only reason why man went to the moon, because there was no other agenda as far as US is concerned. If you really study the entire moon mission program of those periods, Apollo 11, it started. There are only 12 people who have gone to the moon surface and got back. Subsequently, Apollo program was cancelled because of 2 to 3 aspects. One is that it was an extremely costly program. So definitely you can't continue with such a costly program without any sort of a scientific aim, because there was no scientific aim as far as this program was concerned. The astronauts generally went to the moon, jumped around, collected few stones, and got back. There was no science associated with it. It was a geopolitical program. It was a program to demonstrate the technological one-upmanship. So now, after so many decades, people have understood the relevance of a science as far as moon surface is concerned, and that's why now so many countries, including India, are looking towards the moon. So in those days, it was out and out a political gaming, and the program or the Apollo 11 program or the entire Apollo program was more of a political program. Why I'm making these things before getting into the weaponization is that there has to be an understanding that space has been politicized, may not be directly in terms of a military domain, but in terms of a geopolitical domain, or what one can use a terminology in the strategic domain as a most important area to master on. So when one is talking of a space weaponization today, the seeds were there since the beginning only, when the one can say the space age started with the launch of a satellite in 1957 itself. So now one has to get into the issues of a space militarization and space weaponization. You see, if you see the literature, at times you will find that this terminology has been used interchangeably. But there is a subtle difference between what is a weaponization and what is a militarization of a space is concerned. As far as space militarization is concerned, I can just quote a few examples over here, particularly the 1991 Gulf War, which was seen by many in the world by sitting in their drawing rooms in a real time. This happened because of the space technologies. The war itself was dominated by space technologies. Few strategic thinkers call this war as the first space war also. Why it has been called as a first space war? Because in this particular warfare, there are various satellite technologies which were put in use very successfully. Which were those technologies? The first and foremost is a communication technology. If I can watch something by sitting in my drawing room as it happens, definitely I need to have a audio and a visual communication technology which can at least pass this information. But that was as far as the normal people, or the if I'm using a correct word, the viewers of the war. But actually, who are fighting the war, the communication becomes an extremely important area. You require particularly in the domain of a warfare, you require a communication which is non-hackable or a safe communication. Satellite technology actually offers you that sort of advantage. The US and allied forces were at a great advantage since they had one of the best communication satellites which were used. The second thing is that these satellite systems were used for gathering certain amount of information. We may call that as a reconnaissance missions. We may call that as a command or a SIGINT missions. That means a communication intelligence was taken up, signals intelligence was picked up. So various forms of intelligence were picked up by using satellite technologies. Now the US had targets which were pre-identified, and they wanted to go and hit a target in a precise manner. That became possible because they had a great network of GPS, that is global positioning system satellites. So all these informations, and in addition to that, you also required, particularly they were fighting a war, which is normally not fought by the US in the past in a desert terrain. So definitely a typical type of a weather situations emerge over there. So you require a weather information also. So the satellite systems were used for the purposes of a communication, for the purposes of a reconnaissance, for the purposes of a navigation, and for the purposes of gathering weather information in a very systematic fashion, in a very, what one can say, effective fashion. In a military parlance, you call that as a force multiplier. So all these inputs which were gathered by the satellite systems were given to the systems which are operational either in air or on ground, be it Air Force, be it missile forces, be it their maritime forces also. So all this information was available and was given to them. Now, the issue as far as legal aspects of a space is concerned, if I can use a navigational system for navigating onto the roads of Delhi or Gurgaon, then definitely the same type of a system also could be used for the purposes of a military also. If I can use a weather satellite system for understanding today what sort of a weather is happening in South India, and is Bangalore is flooded or not, then definitely weather information satellites are there. Communication, you all know that we watch our television channels. Today, internet is also in places via satellite systems only. So as far as usage of these technologies are concerned, there was no legal problem of these aspects. You were using just certain amount of technologies for betterment of your military infrastructure. And you were not going and attacking somebody else's systems. You were not harming somebody else's systems. You were just using your own systems, which otherwise you were using for various activities during peacetime. So when one is talking of a military aspects of a space, or what we commonly call as a militarization of a space, it is not actually going against any sort of a global discourse or a global norm structure as far as the domain of a space is concerned. You're using satellites for the purposes of intelligence gathering, communication, navigation, weather information. It's okay. Nobody has got any issues in it. So as far as space militarization is concerned, nobody has got any issues all over the world if a country is using the satellites for these purposes. The issue comes up when you take a call to go and destroy your adversary's satellite. And then the entire debate and discourse on aspects of a space weaponizations come into being. As far as weaponization of a space is concerned, there were a lot amount of discussions, debates, if you go through the literature of early 80s also, which were there. But actually, the challenges started happening when China undertook an anti-satellite test in the year 2007. So broadly speaking, what is this anti-satellite test and what China did actually? You see, there is a concept called a kinetic kill vehicle. Just to put it in a very simplistic fashion, one can say that when a particular missile is launched without any warhead, that means there is no munition to it. It has got just metal clip or some sort of a metal element associated with it. That metal element goes and hits to a satellite and destroys that satellite. Why a metal element without a warhead can destroy a satellite? It is known as a kinetic kill vehicle. A kinetic energy gets generated because of one particular portion of a metal hitting onto a satellite, and then the satellite gets destroyed. So as far as China was concerned, China just gave an indication to the rest of the world by destroying their own satellite, by doing this particular act, by doing a kinetic kill test. Now, what China did was that they destroyed their satellite. But here the most important aspect comes in about a space debris. I would like to introduce this concept over here only. We will have a few slides about the details of a space debris. But broadly speaking, if you recollect right now, Sunita Williams is stuck out into the space. And we have got a very bad experience of a couple of years back when Indian-born astronaut Kalpana Chawla lost her life when she was coming back to the Earth from the International Space Station. Why I'm bringing this issue out over here is just to explain it to you is that as you start coming from the space, she was at a International Space Station, which is at an altitude of 400 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Normally, the altitude where the low Earth orbit satellites are there. So the space station even continues to remain there only few kilometers here and there. They keep on changing their altitude based on certain technical requirements. So she was getting from the International Space Station. A lot of US spacecrafts in the earlier period also had gone to the International Space Station and have successfully come back. But what went wrong as far as her mission was concerned is that as you start entering the Earth's atmosphere, you have got to witness tremendous amount of an increase in temperatures. So when you are at a cusp of entering the Earth's atmosphere, the temperatures are to the tune of around 2000 and even at places 3000 degrees Celsius. So your spacecraft needs to have a very perfect thermal shield. So if something goes amiss with a thermal shield, the entire thing starts melting out over there. And that's the reason why Kalpana Chawla's spacecraft had faced these problems, because there were a certain amount of problems with the thermal shield, and thermal shield broke. So obviously, because of such a high temperatures, everything which was there started melting down, and only parts of the aircraft had fallen down onto the surface of the Earth. So when one undertakes such type of activities out into the space, certain things come down because of the gravity, certain things continues to remain out over there. So when China undertook this particular test, uh, more than 3000 pieces of a debris continued to remain over there. Here you have to look at the altitude at which China conducted this test. The altitude is around 850 kilometers. Normally, what happens is that at that altitude, there is hardly any sort of a gravitational pull from the Earth's atmosphere. So whatever is put over there continues to remain over there. So all the so-called debris, what we call, because of a Chinese test, are even continue to remain over there into the space even after so many years now. And they will continue to remain over there for many more years. Uh, in a response to the Chinese test, obviously US had to give a response. But again, some sort of a power politics was there. The US was lucky enough to identify one of their satellites which has gone unserviceable, and that satellite was was expected to fall onto the space. So what US decided was that they said that this is a good opportunity. Let's do certain amount of a engagement of that satellite. Let's destroy that satellite out into the space and give an indication to China that you are not the only country who is having this technology. We also know how to use this technology. In fact, in the early 80s, US and Soviets have actually done an anti-satellite test, few missions only, but they have understood that it will create space debris and it is harmful for everybody. So they had stopped that. But since China did it, US had no other option but to respond to it. And they responded it within 1 year in the year 2008. But the beauty of US mission was that they did an interception at an altitude of 240 kilometers. This is the altitude where any part of a debris which has been created normally gets down, enters the Earth's atmosphere. And I already told you that the temperatures as you enter the Earth's atmosphere are so high that every portion of a debris gets melted out. So eventually, even if you do an anti-satellite test, you're not creating any debris the way China did it. The other indication which the US gave was that they have done this test by a ship-based launcher. Now, the most important aspect of it, we will not get into the technical details of these things is that, but broadly speaking, if I have to use a land-based missile to kill a particular satellite, that geometry has to be there in a perfect fashion. That means the line of sight of satellite from where I will be launching missile and all that. You need to do a lot of calculations actually to go and hit a satellite. And you may not get that opportunity every day to kill a satellite based on the position of a satellite, at what altitude it is there, whether it is a polar orbiting satellite or any other satellite. All those things come into the calculation at that point in time. And in a simplistic fashion, you just can't get up from the sleep and just go and destroy anybody's satellite. It requires a good amount of a preparation, and more importantly, there has to be a particular window on which only you can kill that satellite or destroy that satellite. But as you know that three-fourths of the Earth is the oceans only. So you can go anywhere in the ocean and destroy a satellite. So US gave that indication to the rest of the world that it's not that they can destroy a satellite based on a ship-based, based on a land-based launcher, but they can do it from a ship also. So that was one indication. And the other indication is that we can destroy a satellite, but we are not creating debris. So please don't blame us for creation of a debris. India did a similar type of a test in the year 2019. Obviously, you all understand what were India's compulsions. India also smartly did a test and destroyed their own satellite at an altitude of 280 kilometers. So obviously, hardly any debris got created. Almost 95% of the debris which got generated within no time had entered the Earth's atmosphere, and the debris was taken care of because it got melted away. There are only few pieces of debris. As of today, there could be 3, 4 pieces of debris which have slightly shifted to the higher altitude continue to remain over there. So more or less, one can say confidently that India also did a debris-less anti-satellite test. Just a couple of years back, Russia also did a test, but again, unfortunately, Russia also went for a debris generated debris generating test over here. And they also around 500 kilometers undertook this test, and the debris which has been created by them continues to remain over there. Now, the issue is that why debris is so problematic. As I have already explained it to you that when you do an anti-satellite test, a kinetic kill sort of a test, a metal piece goes and impacts a satellite. And it ends up creating a lot amount of a kinetic energy, and this both the metal piece as well as the satellite starts getting destroyed. So under those circumstances, one can safely say that any debris piece also which is there floating out into the atmosphere, if it comes into the close vicinity of a satellite and impacts the satellite, there is a possibility that that satellite will become either totally unoperationable or it will even break into the pieces. It depends on what sort of an impact that particular debris has made and what is the size of that debris. So any debris for that matter is problematic for any satellite. So when somebody undertakes a debris generated satellite test, that country itself will have problems with that debris more. You see, if one is talking based on what one can say that percentages, since US has got more number of satellites, since China has got more number of satellites, the possibility of any debris hitting their own satellites is definitely more than the countries which have got one or two satellites only. So everybody understands that the debris is a problem and one should not intentionally create a debris. Uh, Before getting into the details of a debris, let me just give a brief idea of what could be the counter space weapons also. Like I have already told you about categories of a counter space weapon. One category, that is the kinetic physical, or what I showed you all those slides about the India doing an anti-satellite test, or a China or a US doing anti-satellite test. These were the kinetic vehicles, one can say kinetic weapons, which were launched as a missile from the surface of the Earth, and they ended up destroying a satellite. So is only a kinetic method available to destroy a satellite? Definitely not. There are cyber means where you can jam a satellite. There are a few other non-kinetic physical methods also. There are electronic means also. But why people are doing anti-satellite test in that fashion? Because there is something which is known as a optics which is associated with it. You're clearly giving indication to your adversary that yes, we have mastered this technology and now we are pretty good as far as missile technologies are concerned. So there are 2 to 3 indications which have been given. In today's world, when one is talking of a space warfare and countries like India, countries like US undertaking anti-satellite tests, it has got nothing to do with actually using them in a warfare. It is actually something like testing your nuclear weapons. You're just giving an indication that yes, this is sort of a deterrence capacity which is available with us. In actual warfare, there is a very less possibility that people may go for a kinetic sort of a weapon because it will again create debris and it will create problem for the country's own satellite systems also. So there are various other mechanisms which have been worked on, and these mechanisms I have just mentioned over here. As far as types of anti-satellite tests are also concerned, I've already mentioned it to you that you use ballistic missiles to destroy the satellite with a metal strip as a warhead. Otherwise, when one is talking of a non-kinetic type of things, you can use lasers. You can use laser systems which are ground-based or air-based also to jam the satellites either permanently or temporarily. Then you can use your other installations also where you can have a cyber attacks onto the satellites. So there are various ways and means which are there to jam a satellite, particularly using a cyber system to jam a satellite, particularly the electronics, compromising the electronics of a satellite is possible mainly for the legacy systems. Because as you understand that many satellites which are launched into a geostationary orbit are the satellites which are there for 10 to 15 years. So our cyber infrastructure from a cyber security perspective was not that strong, or nobody would have thought that a cyber attack also could be launched on a satellite. As far as today's satellites are concerned, which have been launched, there is certain amount of a precaution which has been taken that unnecessarily nobody can jam it by using cyber attacks. But yes, it's not 100% foolproof mechanism. People are still working towards it. Now, let me come back to the issue of a space debris. When I'm saying that when you conduct an anti-satellite test and you destroy a satellite, that creates space debris, but that is only one aspect associated with it. As far as space debris are concerned, the debris are there because of certain natural reasons also and certain artificial reasons also. As far as natural reasons are concerned, they're beyond our control and beyond the scope of today's talk, so I'll not talk about it. As far as artificial reasons are concerned, you have got various types of debris which have been created, number one. Number two is that when you launch a satellite, usually I'm sure you must have heard or read in papers also that when you launch a rocket has got various stages. If I have to just for the sake of simplicity talk about India's PSLV or a polar satellite launch vehicle, it has got 4 stages. So after the fourth stage reaches into the space, say around 600 kilometers or something, the satellites is launched. But the fourth stage also continues to remain over there because from that particular stage, the satellite has been released into the space. That stage also remains over there. And the fourth stage or the last stage of any sort of a rocket launcher actually ends up becoming a space debris. Then there is a concept called a Kessler syndrome. Now, what happens is that these space debris are moving endlessly, and there is no fixed orbit as far as these debris are concerned. So, under those circumstances, there is a possibility that these debris hit each other and create more amount of a debris. So, there are various aspects which are associated with the debris. People have started now cataloging the debris. So, particularly, US Air Force has got a system available, and they are cataloging these debris. So, I'm sure you must have heard in newspapers also that if ISRO is making a launch, on occasions ISRO has delayed the launch by 1 minute or 2 minutes or so, because as far as the space debris warning system is concerned, they have been warned that there is a possibility that when you're launching a satellite, a particular debris may come into your line of sight. So we delay those types of things. So there is a lot amount of work which is actually happening on these debris. As far as Kessler syndrome is there, I already told you that when debris collide on each other, they create more number of debris. Um, there is no fixed quantity which is known as far as number of debris are concerned, because there are a lot of debris which are less than 1 centimeter also, and they are not being tracked in the atmosphere. But yes, there is a reasonable amount of indication that how many objects are there out into the space and how many objects are more than 10 centimeters in size. Who is responsible for these things? Obviously, if you launch more number of satellites, there will be more number of debris out into the space because of the uh, what I can say that the last stage of a rocket remains there as a debris, and at the same time, the satellites which are end of their life. That means if my satellite, particularly in low Earth orbit, your satellites are launched with a life period of 3 to 5 years. So they continue to remain there at the end of their life period as a debris only, because the fuel has been already spent and the satellites are moving aimlessly, or they do not have any specific orbit. So Russia has made a lot amount of contribution to the space junk. Obviously, it all depends on your number of satellites which you launch, the type of your launcher system, so on and so forth. In today's world, people have now started understanding. If you read, even India has now started putting their fourth stage in the orbit, which remains as a debris. They give certain amount of additional fuel to it and try to get back that stage into a lower, in a lower orbit, or one can say in a lower altitude, and allow it to enter the Earth's atmosphere, and automatically it gets burned off. Similarly, when now SpaceX is launching so many satellites, these satellites are there only for the period of 3 to 5 years. Obviously, so many satellites will end up becoming debris. So there is certain amount of a mechanism when the satellite is at the end of its lifetime, it will start coming down into the altitude, and it will eventually enter the Earth's atmosphere and start melting it. But what happens is that there are commercial aspects which are associated with it. If you compromise on the fuel, then definitely your satellite's lifetime will be lesser. So some commercial companies are slightly hesitant, and we don't have a proper rule position as far as these things are concerned. And that's the reason still satellites are expected to remain in the form of a debris. Then there are very few other areas which are of concern. Why I'm highlighting all those areas is that because all these areas are important as far as the space weaponization is concerned. Today, there is a concept which has come up called on-orbit servicing. You can send a robotic equipment to repair a satellite. You see, when satellite is at end of its life, essentially what happens is that, to put it very crudely, it's a power source gets over. It's something like a battery in your car or a scooter. If a battery is dead, the system will not function. So now there are robotic equipments which have been worked on or researched on, where you can just go with a new set of batteries and change or replace the existing batteries into the satellite system. So in that context, what you can end up doing is that you can increase the life of a satellite. If today my satellite is there for 5 years, I just have to replace the batteries, because all your electronics, optical sensors and other sensors usually do not have much of a problem of aging. Yes, after 10-15 years, they will have certain amount of problems, but yes, you can increase the life of a satellite by doing these things. But you don't have a rule-based mechanism. So tomorrow, on the garb of changing batteries of my own satellite, I can do certain amount of activities to destroy or to disrupt my adversary satellites also. So what is the need of the hour is to have a rule-based mechanism into all these things. As far as debris reduction is concerned, there are certain technologies which have been worked on. There are ideas like space lasso and all that, where You can send a robotic craft which will create most of the debris, allow those debris to burn off by bringing them into low Earth orbit, particularly closer to the Earth's atmosphere where temperatures are very high. But in all these game, the issue is that if a state decides on its own to do all these activities, then definitely there is going to be a problem. And all these activities can actually end up by pushing states in the zone of a space warfare, because you can go totally aimlessly as far as the rest of the world is concerned. For you as a country or a private agency, your aim are very clear that on the you can say as a facade, I can say that I am going to clear the debris, but while clearing the debris, I will also eat up few smaller satellites of other countries too. The forecast is that the space junk is at a tipping point and the problem could triple by 2030. So for these purposes, first, the issue is that we need to know what is happening out into the space. And that is the most important issue. Here I am just digressing from my talk and giving an example of a nuclear detonation system. Suppose hypothetically, say North Korea has conducted a nuclear test. Within no time the world comes to know about it. Why world comes to know about it? This is essentially because we have got seismographs which are positioned here and there. So anything which goes amiss as far as the earth's internal dynamics is concerned, whether it is an earthquake or various other activities which are man-made activities, you immediately come to know about it. So this is the basic advantage of having these seismographic systems. As far as space is concerned, other than the US, we do not have a very major mechanism out over there. So when China conducted an anti-satellite test, we came to know about it only because US decided to tell to the rest of the world that yes, there is a space junk which is there now because China has conducted an anti-satellite test. So broadly speaking, very few countries in the world are actually monitoring what is happening out into the space. Like in a nuclear domain, almost every country, because of the requirements of an earthquake, and because their all weather systems are so good that you already will come to know about it. But that's not the case as far as space is concerned. So you need to know information in the space, and for that purpose, you require a certain amount of a mechanism. This mechanism is known as a space situational awareness mechanism. And just to bring to your notice is that only a country can't, irrespective of they having so many assets with them, just try to monitor, can't afford to monitor the space, because you require your infrastructure to be put in various parts of the world. Now, this infrastructure could be in terms of satellites, in terms of ground radars, in terms of space-based radars, in terms of telescopes, so on and so forth. So today, the most important aspect, if you have to avoid space weaponization or any sort of a warfare into the space, is first to know what is happening into the space. Like India has come out with a brilliant idea of a global agency as far as solar power is concerned. So similarly, you require certain ideas as far as the space situational awareness is concerned, that you just can't depend on the US Air Force giving the forecast. You require a global agency which will look in a very transparent fashion what is happening out into the space. Then there are concepts like that for aircrafts you require a air traffic management system. In a similar fashion, tomorrow a time is going to come up where you will require a space traffic management system also. So all those systems which will be created should be done under some sort of a UN regulated mechanisms or under some sort of a multidisciplinary agency. Then only a transparency in this system will come. Again, an important area as far as space situational awareness is concerned is space weather. I'm sure some of you must have read in the papers about recently we had some space storms, and visually they were very magnificent as far as these space storms were concerned. Aurora was witnessed in particularly areas of North America and Canada and adjoining regions. But these space storms have capacity to destroy your satellites. Just 2 years back, if you can see the last point in the slide, on February 3, 2022, 49 satellites were put into a low Earth orbit by Elon Musk's SpaceX. And within a day, 40 of them were lost because there was a heavy impact of space solar storms. So a space solar storm can give you a very visually good manifestation of aurora or some rings and all that. But at the same time, if they are very strong storms, they will actually end up destroying the electronics of a satellite. So you require early warning as far as these things are concerned. If you remember a couple of, I think a year back only, India has launched a satellite called Aditya L1, essentially to understand what is happening out into the space. So it's not only space situational awareness required from a perspective of what is happening out into the space vis-a-vis the artificial systems which have been put. You require a system where a space where the monitoring is also happening at a continuous basis. So broadly, for all these purposes, you require a global structure. But if you see, space is changing off late. Commercialization of a space is a reality and it has started happening. And it has started happening in a various forms. Couple of years back, you had satellites which have been launched by the commercial systems. Today, today space travel is becoming extremely important from a commercial perspective also. And you know that Richard Branson and you got even Blue Origin, which is a part of Amazon, that has also started taking tourists out into the space. So all these things have been done in a good faith, good fashion, but there is no legal system which is available to monitor all those activities. People are taking their own calls and going to the space and getting back. Today it is good, it is happening in a small scale. Tomorrow you just don't know whether certain amount of weaponization aspects could emerge with them or not. So broadly speaking, there was a conceptualization which was done by India's ex-president Dr. Abdul Kalam. He said that you want to have a major increment in space tourism. Military utility of a space is going to increase, and people are going to make investments into Earth, Moon, and Mars economy, that is EMM economy. Particularly because of COVID crisis, there were certain setbacks which were received by a space industry, but now space industry has started what can say reinventing itself and going to the higher zones. As you know that Boeing has done a particular launch taking Sunita Williams and one more astronaut to the International Space Station, and they got stuck over there. But who is going to get them back? It's a SpaceX who is going to get them back. So role of a private industry is also increasing, and that is going to be very challenging. As far as deep space missions are concerned, missions to Moon and Mars, I've already given you in my introductory remark what is there. So as far as counter space technologies are concerned, what are the challenges? Arms race is obviously a challenge. My adversary has got ASAT capacity. I also should have a ASAT capacity. That sort of a thing. This conceptualization of arms race is actually happening since Cold War era, and it will going to continue. Then there could be various other demands also. Just to make it clear, why India did an anti-satellite test was for two reasons. One is as a deterrence mechanism, and other is that I am continuously saying that there is no rule-based mechanism. India has learned from its NPT experiences. Because as far as nuclear weapons are concerned, we have got one of the most workable treaties and one of the most magnificent treaties, one can say, in terms of NPT. But the flip side of NPT is that it says that only 5 countries in the world can hold nuclear weapons, and rest of us are second-class citizens of this world. India never wanted this type of a thing to happen into a domain of a space also. So India ensured that India remains into the high table by becoming a ASAT power. So tomorrow, any sort of a mechanism which will be looked into the domain of a space, the world has got no other option but to consult India. As far as classification of space weapons are concerned, we'll not get into the details of it. But yes, there are directed energy weapons, there are kinetic energy weapons. More importantly, I would like to highlight over here that there are concepts like parasitic satellites. That means a mother satellite goes to the space with smaller satellites in its belly. And as and when the requirement comes up, as I already explained it to you in case of a space debris, a debris also can hit a satellite. So you create artificial debris by putting a small satellite. People call that as space mines also, and destroy a satellite. Because we just don't know what is there inside a satellite of various countries. There are various other alternative ideas as far as space weaponization of a space warfare is concerned. But luckily, these ideas still are in a very theoretical form. There's a concept I'm sure some of you who are interested into the domain of a space could have heard called rods from God. That means you put a tungsten rod into the spacecraft, and as and when the requirement comes up, you can aim it directly onto the surface of the Earth on a particular target and just release those rods. It is said that these types of tungsten rod can create a damage equivalent to a Hiroshima or a Nagasaki. But I'm sure we got enough amount of a weapon, so you don't have to go all the way to the space and target something onto the surface of the Earth. Broadly speaking, today the discussion and debates as far as space weaponization and space weapons are concerned is restricted more amount of unpleasantry activities happening into the space. But at the same time, one must understand that the space also could be used as a battleground, not only to fight a war into the space, but to address the challenges onto the surface of the Earth also. So there are a lot amount of potential as far as space arms are concerned, space weapons are concerned. I've already spoken about on-orbit servicing. Then I've spoken about debris removal technologies. These are the technologies which are going to be extremely challenging as far as the technology development is concerned, but people have already reached to a particular level of expertise in this domain. But now the issue is that if I use these technologies without any sort of a mechanism, then definitely I can use these technologies for my military gains also. Understanding all these things, understanding the challenges which are there from China. And one must make a mention out over here is that the challenges as far as space weaponization is concerned from a US perspective are not only from a China, but also from Russia also. Russia has got a great space infrastructure. Unfortunately, it had so happened that for last couple of decades, there were certain amount of problems with their existing system. There was a gap which was there because Soviet scientists had retired, so no new scientific community was invested in. And at the same time, there were certain acquisitions about corruption and all that that is happening. But in spite of all those things, Russian space program is a very potent space program. And particularly from the perspective of counter space weapons, it is a very potent space program. And understanding both China and Russia threat, US has established a separate vertical only as far as space is concerned. And now they got a space force also along with their army, navy, and other forces. As far as India is concerned, India has come out with its own agency called DSA, that is Space Defense Agency, in the year 2019. When you're looking at the rest of the world, yes, Russia has established its own command, and there are a few other countries also which are having their own space commands. China has got its own system which is plugged into their rocket forces, a very potent force, one can say, from the perspective of a space. Then you've got countries like Germany who has established their own system. Then there are a few other countries also who have established their rocket forces, which are now capable of addressing the challenges into the space also. Just have identified these things over here. Those who have interested, Japan has got an agency like this. Even Iran has got an agency. Then French Air Force has got an agency. UK has an agency. Germany, I already made a mention. Australia has got an agency, and Canada also has got an agency. And India, I already said that you got a space defense agency. But the structures of these agencies are very limited. We need to see, and I'm sure that in years to come, these structures are going to enhance because now the threat is at our doorstep. As far as India's concerns are there, you all know that China is a major concern. China is not concerned because of only China. China is giving full-fledged assistance as far as the military aspects of a space are concerned to Pakistan. Particularly, China has got one of the best systems as far as global navigation is concerned, called Baidu. And China is giving the military rights to Pakistan as far as Baidu system is concerned. So China's investments into space technologies have got double impact as far as India is concerned, because China is ready to offer anything and everything to Pakistan as far as military aspects or weaponization aspects of space are concerned. As far as Pakistan on its own is concerned, it is not having a very good space program. In fact, Pakistan has suffered majorly, and Pakistan space program is hardly any space program with two, three satellites and all that. They can't launch a satellite on their own. But Pakistan has got a good missile force. So to do an anti-satellite test may not be difficult for China, particularly with to Pakistan, particularly with China's help. As far as Sino-US rivalry in space is concerned, I've already made a mention about it that US has invested into a domain of a space because they understand that China is going to come up very heavily into the domain of a space. Particularly from a counter space technologies, China's investments have been very phenomenal during last one odd decade, and US is very pretty concerned about it. Couple of years back, just before 9/11, there was a Rumsfeld Commission which was there into the US, and that commission has categorically said that the future Pearl Harbor, as far as the US is concerned, could happen into a space. So everybody understand the nature of a threat and the nature of an enemy also, which is making continuous investments into the domain of a space. China understands that they can't match NASA. Irrespective of anything, China's space program is still much far behind than the US space program. So they want to have certain amount of a asymmetric advantage, and that's why they are now looking at space issues. In fact, routinely China temporarily jams US satellites, and that is a known fact when they are trying to look at Taiwan theater. So these activities are happening for quite some time, and everybody understands all those things. As far as India is concerned, what is at stake? Almost all our space assets are at stake. The major threat could be our low Earth orbit satellite constellations. We got satellite constellations like Cartosat series or RISAT series. These are dual purpose satellites because India just can't afford to have only military grade satellites because of the financial limitations. So India has got a satellite series which is being used both by the civilian administration as well as the military. So as far as India is concerned, one can say safely that almost everything as far as India's investments into space domain are concerned are at stake. As far as India needs to think is that yes, we got a defense space agency, but we need to move further and at least have a space command. The world is addressing these challenges in which forms? Continuously, I'm saying that there is no legal regime and all that, but one must understand that yes, there are certain amount of formal agreements. These are the foundational agreements. I'm not getting into the details of every agreement over here, but these are very useful and important agreements. 1967 Outer Space Treaty is one of the best agreement which is available till date. Many countries in the world have signed this agreement. But it has got limitations because this treaty mechanism came into being not for the purposes of a space alone. It came into being that you please don't do some sort of a testing of a nuclear weapons out into the space. So Outer Space Treaty, the heart of Outer Space Treaty is all about not testing nuclear weapons out into the space or not testing WMDs out into the space. But there are a few other agreements which were important agreements, a rescue agreement. This is essentially because of the astronaut issues that an astronaut of a particular country, because of certain amount of technical glitches or weather conditions, when it is being brought down to the surface of the earth, may fall his craft into other country. So at that time, that country should not consider this astronaut as a prisoner of war and immediately release the astronaut to the country which it belongs to. So these are the agreements. Then there is something known as a liability convention. Suppose I am launching the satellite, particularly in the Indian case, if I have to give you an example, that we launch a satellite from the South Indian parts of the India. So there is a possibility that something goes amiss and the satellite during launch stage falls in some areas of Sri Lanka or something. Then we are supposed to give the damage to that particular country. So these are the liability convention. Then there are satellites, particularly which are in the geostationary orbit, are being registered before they have been launched and all that. Then there is a concept of a moon agreement also. Not many takers for these things. UN has become very cautious about challenges which are going to emerge out into the space since beginning. Remember, the first satellite was launched in the year 1957, but within no time, the UN has come out with a committee for the peaceful uses of our outer space. But as far as UN systems are concerned, there is no treaty mechanism. The way we have got chemical weapons treaty, the way we have got nuclear weapons treaty and all that, there is no treaty mechanism out into the space. So all these UN bodies have got certain amount of limitations. So under those circumstances, there are certain other aspects which are happening in recent times. China and Russia has given a draft TT, but you all understand that as far as P5, the permanent five members of the Security Council are concerned, there are two clear blocks. One is China, Russia, and other three are in a different block. So definitely whatever China, Russia suggest, I'm not saying that whatever they have suggested is a foolproof mechanism, but other people are just not ready to look at it. As far as India is concerned, India said that if this treaty mechanism is discussed under the UN, we are very happy to discuss about it. Then there are very few other things is there. The common cliched word nowadays is look for a low hanging fruit. So basically, because everybody understands that people are not going to sign on a dotted line as far as stopping weaponization of a space is concerned or any aspects associated with a space weapon is concerned for various reasons. The most important reason is that today you all understand that what is a missile defense system. if there is an incoming nuclear weapon missile towards my country, I do a counter attack by launching a missile from my own missile silos and try to engage that missile somewhere out into the space. So under those circumstances, if one says that you please ban weaponization of a space, all your S-400 hard missile defense systems, they will lose their purpose. So US is particularly vehemently opposing any sort of a rule-based mechanism. So under those circumstances, people are looking for what we call as a low-hanging fruits, and these are non-legally binding mechanisms. There was an attempt which was done by European Union called International Code of Conduct. There were 4 drafts which are presented of these things, but right now the idea is still lying in a dormant fashion. Then the UN has got a concept of a GGE, that is a group of governmental experts. So some group of governmental experts were appointed. Usually 15 countries are appointed for that. The first GGE was successful. They came out with something known as the transparency and confidence building mechanisms. Second GGE, there was a problem. So now UN has come out with an open-ended working group. So people are generally talking about it. And to my mind, at least talking on these issues is important. There should not be any lack of a debate or an absence of a debate. So at least the global space community is been in a position to make it sure that debate remains live on these aspects. How it will take for only God knows. To achieve space security and sustainability approach, you got 2 types of approaches. One is a disarmament approach, which I just now said that you can have a rule-based treaty mechanism, and other is a responsible behavior approach, where I have said that it's a low-hanging fruit, it's a non-binding, not legally applicable sort of a mechanism. Right now, the focus is on a responsible behavior approach. Recently, US has come out with a concept called Artemis Accord. India has also signed this accord. But this accord has got certain dubious sections also. So it's going to be challenging as far as rest of the world is concerned, because US has already started claiming what is there onto the surface of the moon. One of the provisions in Artemis Accord goes and says that we will go to the moon, we will demarcate a particular area, saying that this is the area where we are doing research. And after our research gets over, we will release that area. So rest of the world, if your spacecrafts have to come and land over there. So theoretically, what may happen is that today, when we are looking at the moon and Mars, it is actually a race for resources. So what will happen out over there is that you will just try to pick up whatever the resources are there and leave the moon to the rest of the world where already the resources have been exploited. So the debate is there. The reality is a geopolitics of a space. The threat is a space weaponization. The menace is a space debris. The information gathering mechanism requirement is space situational awareness. So the response has to be manifold in these things. So in conclusion, I will say that space security is an issue. There's a global acceptance that we need to have a mechanism. But as I told you, that to have a rule-based mechanism is going to be very difficult. Legal mechanisms have limitations. However, they are the best options. And countries like India are continuously arguing in favor of a legal mechanism. But yes, as a first step, one can always look for a low-hanging fruits and go in for any sort of a space code of conduct sort of a mechanism. I'll stop over here. If you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Uh, Thanks a lot, Dr. Lele. It was a very insightful presentation, and the points you made that gave us a very detailed understanding of how space is being weaponized nowadays. So for now, we have got a few questions. First one is from some anonymous attendee, and the question is, sir, the rate of the growth in signals intelligence and ELINT has been increasing rapidly, and with China setting up the PLARF, the ASAT must be a major focus point for them, for which we have to work on countering. But in what ways can we do that? It's basically a mixed up question.
Yeah, I think I will address
Yes.
it now only. It's an interesting question. I fully understand the nature of a threat which China's communication systems also providing. One can't counter their communication systems. Only good point as far as we are concerned is that we have already started investing into technologies like quantum and all that. So we require a secure communication system. So quantum communication, quantum cryptography are actually the flavor of the season, and we need to more in that and ensure that our communication system is a robust system.
Thank you, sir. Second, a question is from Colonel Shashank Ranjan, who happened to be a, a, a professor in our department. So he teaches counterterrorism. So his question is, China has launched quantum satellite in 2016. What advantages does quantum technology has in space arena?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think I've already just made a mention to the same thing. You see, one must understand that China is not only a technologically superior country in present context, but it's a smart country. In the year 2016, China realized that actually a country like Austria has made tremendous amount of investments into quantum technologies. But unfortunately, neither European Union nor Austria was supporting the was ready to help the scientists from Austria, and China saw that as an opportunity. So when China has launched the first quantum satellite in 2016, it is actually a Austrian technology which China just purchased it and launched it. The advantage of a quantum satellites, as I already made a mention, as far as quantum cryptography, quantum communications is concerned, in years to come, the ideas of a quantum-based internet is also going to emerge out. The other issue as far as China's quantum technologies are concerned is that China is working endlessly in quantum technologies. They have already established what we call QKD, that is quantum communication systems, which are able to join right from Shanghai to Beijing also. They have tested those technologies also. Countries like India are able to successfully do a quantum communication and demonstrate it only towards a distance of hardly 1 kilometers or so. So we have to go a long way. As far as quantum satellites are concerned, a couple of years back, China has launched their own quantum nano satellite.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Professor Avinash Godbole has posted the next question. He's a professor at GSLH at UP Jindal University. So Donald Trump's idea of a space force, how credible is that, and which countries have a capacity for it?
As far as Space Force is concerned, initially there were a lot of resistance to Donald Trump in Congress. As far as establishment of a Space Force is concerned, there were problems of allotting the budget and all that. But now things have gone in a perfect fashion as far as US is concerned. They have established a very potent Space Force. There are a lot amount of agencies which are there. You see, US has got a system that Space Force is in as an independent agency. At the same time, they have got something known as a Space Command also. So US has categorized its requirements from space militarization and space weaponization, which is not the case with other countries, including India. So there is a certain amount of what you can say confusion as far as other countries are concerned. But just to give an example, that there are people who are making certain amount of deviations also. Like couple of years back, maybe 2 years back or so, China has established what is known as a near space force or a near space command. Now, what is the concept of a near space? Basically, your satellites start in the low Earth orbit from an altitude of around 400 kilometers. But when you fly aircrafts, even your military aircrafts do certain amount of a stratospheric flying. So normally, at the most, one can say that till 60 kilometers above the Earth's surface, something is flying. But beyond 60 kilometers, till say 400 kilometers, which is the zone of low Earth orbit satellites, nothing actually flies. And China wants to exploit this zone. And that's the reason China has established a near space command also, where they are going to put their hypersonic weapons. As far as China is concerned, they are looking at an altitude till 100 kilometers at least at this point in time. So above 60 kilometers and 100 kilometers, that particular area China is going to exploit. And I'm sure you must have read all the stories of China sending balloons. So that was not a very simplistic act of receiving information for the purposes of a weather. Obviously, there was certain amount of intelligence gathering mechanism, and they were just testing the waters. But after that, they have come with a near space command, and one has to be very serious about how this command grows up in future.
Thank you, sir. Uh, I want to ask a question, sir. So, given the evidence that Ukraine has been utilizing a commercial satellite imagery for gathering and analyzing tactical and operational intelligence about Russian forces. So, companies, for example, Finnish ICI and American Maxar, have been providing high quality commercial satellite imagery to Ukraine. And Ukraine has also relied on services, for example, Starlink for communication during critical engagements, for example, the Battle of Kiev or the Siege of Azovstal. So, how do you see the role of private players evolving in contemporary space warfare, and what implications does it have for the future conflicts?
Thank you so much. I think this is a very interesting question. If you slightly go back to the history in the year 1991, when the US was fighting a war with Iraq, there was
Yes.
a realization after some time that Iraq already during peacetime has got established some sort of a communication with spot satellite agency, and they actually were getting imagery when the war started. So subsequently, US has put certain amount of restrictions about how to sell the satellite imagery to other countries and all that. So as far as the role of a private industry is concerned, goes back to 1991, but it has become very prominent into the recent times. And today, if you see the countries like US, they are expecting much from a private players. So in years to come, private players will have a very significant role as far as selling the imagery data is concerned. But I must say two to three things over here about this role of a private concerns over here. Private concerns, fairly enough, are there in for the business. So in years to come, when military imagery is required, definitely private players will charge phenomenally if they understand that the country is totally in need of a imagery. So there is a possibility that private players will make good amount of a money, and that is making money is not an issue, but making money just to understanding, it's like your private airliners. If Diwali is there and all that, your airline tickets goes definitely for more amount. In a similar fashion, one has to wait and watch that how these types of issues which will come up. But the most important issue where how much amount of a leverage you should go to the private players comes from a recent example of a Ukraine war, which you're saying. As far as Ukraine war was concerned, Elon Musk has categorically mentioned one thing, that Ukraine was asking for a satellite support for a particular sort of a attack in Crimea. And he went and met to the Russian ambassador. And Russian ambassador said that if you extend these types of a help, and if something goes amiss in Crimea, it could even lead to a nuclear disaster. So under those circumstances, Elon Musk had made a statement that since he realized that there is a threat of a nuclear war, he decided not to support Ukraine in giving a particular set of a data or a particular area where the Ukraine was asking it. So imagine a person of a what can say Elon Musk's thinking took a call about stopping a nuclear war. A person who actually undertakes a lot amount of missions just for the sake of testing that oh failure is not an issue. He could have gone slightly rogue also. So one has to understand that how much amount of a leverage you should give to the private companies that tomorrow they actually are taking a decision as far as warfare is concerned. So here there was a clear-cut decision which was taken by a private entity to avoid a nuclear war. It was a good decision taken by him, but you never know when private entities will take certain types of a decision in future also. So one should not get totally carried away. Oh, space may you got a lot of agencies which are there. Good amount of a privatization is happening. There is a flip side to it also.
Exactly, sir. So the next question from an anonymous attendee is, how much space a debris is currently in orbit, and how accurately can we track and monitor objects in space? How likely is a catastrophic collision event that could trigger the Kessler syndrome?
You see, as far as Kessler syndrome is concerned, it's already happening. Space debris are hitting on each other and they are creating more amount of a debris. and it will continue to happen as far as the debris are there out into the space. As far as number of space debris are concerned, there are various mathematical models which have been put in use to identify, because your existing system is not able to tell you the exact nature of a debris. If you've seen my slides, I have in one slide I have given indication about 10 centimeters or more, how many number of debris are there. Less than 10 centimeter, how many number of debris are there. So it is varying somewhere between 35,000 to 26,000 pieces out into the space. But there could be smaller debris also which have not been taken care of, in a sense, which have not been identified. Because US Air Force has got a system which is identifying the debris and numbering them. But that is a limited number of debris. That's why in my entire presentation, I was arguing that you need to have a transparent mechanism as far as space situational awareness is concerned. Because today we are not in a position to identify each and every debris and track the movement of each and every debris.
All right, so understood. Next question is from Nikita Woods. So, given the current rate of technological advancements, can small satellites and satellite swarms effectively replace larger, more expensive military satellites for reconnaissance and communication purposes?
Definitely, the way technology is developing, there is definitely a alternative option which is available. You see, as far as military requirements are concerned, it's not only a satellite. Suppose tomorrow nobody will destroy your satellite, but your adversary is definitely going to jam your satellite. And a permanent jamming of a satellite is also possible. So under those circumstances, you need to replace that satellite. So do you have a capacity to do something which is known as a launch on demand? That means, do you have a rocket system which can be put in place, say, within 48 hours and launch a new satellites? That's where the entire work is going on. India has developed a small satellite launch vehicle. Yes, the what you can say for PSLV launch, if you require, say, a time of around, say, 3 months or 6 months in advance, then only you can undertake a launch. That's not going to be the case with small satellite launch vehicle. We have just operationalized this system. There are very positive indications that at least within 72 to slightly more number of hours, we can launch a satellite. So what is requirement of a military is not only to have a satellite system, but to have a mechanism which will allow you to do a launch on demand. And that's where the work is there. Otherwise, as far as satellite systems are concerned, we have got various sensors which are available. India has developed its own sensor called synthetic aperture radar, which after you had the problems in Mumbai, the attacks on Taj Mahal and other things, we have imported the technology from Israel. So we have got a synthetic aperture radar which allows you a visibility of the Earth 24 by 7 in any sort of a weather conditions. So we have got sensors available with us. What we require is actually to a launch on demand capacity.
All right, so uh, well understood. So the next question and the last one, I want to ask this a question. So is it likely that space-based laser or other directed energy weapons will become operational within the next decade, considering the technological challenges, for example, their dependence on atmospheric conditions, cloud cover, and atmospheric distortion, as well as the limitations in power generation and cooling in space environment?
Uh, I think my answer will be both yes and no. No, because totally I am ignorant of what is the level of a technology development with US, China, and few other countries. Because until and unless you just don't have any sort of idea that what is the level of a development. And let me slightly digress over here. Let's talk of hypersonic weapons. As far as hypersonic weapons are concerned, the Kinzhal weapon has been already used by Russia. China has already tested their weapons. Other countries have already also tested their weapons. So those aspects are pretty known. But as far as energy-guided weapons are concerned, space-based lasers are concerned, there are no test results which are available right now. But the way technology is developing at this point in time, I'm sure at least within a decade's time, they will have a operational technology available. But this is just based on a general understanding. There's no evidence to prove that yes, it will happen in next 1 year, 2 years, because no country is disclosing the parameters of their development right now.
Right, so understood. So we do not have any more questions, so we'll move forward to the concluding remarks. Uh, so thank you everyone for joining us in today's engaging and thought-provoking dialogue on space as the next battleground. We have explored the intricacies of space security, the militarization of space, and the evolving geopolitical dynamics that make space an important frontier in the modern strategic considerations. Group captain Dr. Ajay Lele's insightful analysis has shed light on the growing importance of space in the global security frameworks and the pressing need for comprehensive policies to govern this domain. His extensive experience and deep knowledge have provided us with a nuanced understanding of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. Before we conclude, I would like to extend a special thank you to Professor Dr. Gunjan Singh, Associate Professor at Jindal Global Law School, for her invaluable support in making this event possible. Her guidance and commitment to advancing important discussions on geopolitics and strategic issues are greatly appreciated. Lastly, I want to thank the Ideas Office and everyone who contributed to organizing this session, as well as our audiences for your active participation. Your engagement is vital as we continue to explore and address the complex challenges that define our world today. Thank you, and I look forward to your continued involvement in our upcoming events. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lele, sir.
Okay,
Thank you.
just one thing. I just want to thank Dr. Lele for agreeing to speak on this topic and giving us actually a very nuanced and a very detailed presentation and discussion. And obviously, thanks to all the questions and Dr. Lele's effort to answer them all in a very detailed fashion. And thank you, Mohit, for conducting the event, nicely organized. And I look forward to more such events in the future. And thanks to both of you again. Thank you.
Thank you.